The sky tore open with light, and hope came screaming through. Admiral Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel as her second fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the Keth formation. 18 fresh warships, their weapons fully charged, their crews hungry for battle. "All ships, fire at will," she ordered. The Keth fleet, caught between two human forces, erupted in chaos. War leader Keseth watched in horror as his rear guard was torn apart by the newcomers. Ships that had been moments from victory now found themselves fighting for survival. Commander Cole felt his heart surge with relief as he saw the second fleet's markers appear on his tactical display. "All units, push forward. They're trapped between us. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The battle turned in an instant. The Keth, outnumbered now and surrounded, began to falter. Their formation broke as captains tried to find a way to escape the trap. But Keseth was not finished. He had not conquered 12 worlds by giving up when things became difficult. If he could not win in space, he would win on the ground. "Launch the dropships," he ordered. "All assault troops to the surface. Take the capital. Kill their leaders." Hundreds of Keth dropships fell toward Ashara Prime like burning meteors. The human fleet tried to stop them, but too many slipped through the defensive fire. They crashed into the streets of the capital city, and Keth soldiers poured out, weapons blazing. The Valari had no army. They had city guards who carried ceremonial weapons and had never seen real combat. Against the hardened Keth shock troops, they fell like grass before a storm. Captain Cruz heard the reports coming in from the surface and made his decision immediately. "All available Marine units, prepare for combat drop. We're going down there." Lieutenant Kevin Drake was already suiting up when Cruz reached the hangar bay. The big Marine was checking his rifle with calm, practiced movements. Around him, 50 other Marines were doing the same. "Lieutenant," Cruz said, "Elder Morvith and the Council are trapped in the government building. A large Keth force is moving toward them. You need to get there first." Drake nodded. "We'll get it done, sir." The Marine dropship fell through the atmosphere, shaking violently as anti-aircraft fire exploded around it. Drake held on tight and thought about the mission. He had been a soldier for 15 years. He had fought on a dozen worlds against a dozen enemies. But he had never fought for anything that felt as important as this. These Valari had never asked for war. They had spent their lives healing others. They did not deserve what was happening to them. The dropship hit the ground hard, and the doors blew open. Drake was the first one out, his boots hitting the broken street as he scanned for threats. The capital city was burning. Smoke filled the air. Somewhere nearby, he could hear weapons fire and screaming. "Move out," he ordered. "Stay tight. Watch the rooftops." They ran through the ruined streets toward the government building. Everywhere they looked, they saw destruction. Bodies lay in the gutters. Buildings had collapsed from weapons fire. The Keth were not here to conquer. They were here to destroy. Drake's squad reached the main plaza just as the Keth assault force was surrounding the government building. At least 200 enemy soldiers were setting up positions, preparing to storm the entrance where a handful of Valari guards were making their last stand. 50 against 200, one of Drake's Marines muttered. "Great odds." Drake smiled grimly. "I've had worse." "Set up firing positions. We hit them hard and fast. No mercy." The Marines opened fire from behind the Keth lines. Their weapons were superior, their training was better, and they had the element of surprise. The first volley cut down 30 Keth soldiers before they even knew what was happening. The battle for the government building became a nightmare of close combat. The Keth outnumbered the Marines 4-1, but the humans refused to fall back. They fought from building to building, room to room, using every trick they knew to hold the enemy at bay. Drake himself killed 14 Keth soldiers in the first 10 minutes. He moved through the smoke like a ghost, appearing suddenly to strike down enemies before vanishing again. His Marines followed his example, fighting with a fury that shocked the Keth, but numbers told. The Marines began to fall. One by one, they went down, wounded or killed. Drake took a plasma burn across his shoulder that nearly dropped him. He gritted his teeth against the pain and kept fighting. Inside the government building, Elder Morvith and his council huddled in the central chamber. They could hear the fighting outside, getting closer with every passing minute. The Valari guards at the doors looked terrified. They knew they could not stop what was coming. Then the doors exploded inward, and Keth soldiers poured through. Morvith closed his eyes, ready for death. He had lived a long life. He had served his people well. If this was the end, he would face it with dignity. But death did not come. Instead, he heard human voices shouting and the roar of human weapons. He opened his eyes to see Lieutenant Drake standing in the doorway, his rifle blazing, his uniform torn and burned. Behind him, a handful of Marines fought with desperate courage against the Keth force. The fighting was brutal and brief. When it was over, 12 Keth soldiers lay dead in the council chamber. Drake stood over Morvith, bleeding from 3 wounds, swaying on his feet but refusing to fall. "Are you hurt, sir?" Drake asked. Morvith stared at the human soldier in amazement. "You came for us. You came through all of that for us." Drake smiled through the pain. "That's the job, sir." He collapsed a moment later, his strength finally giving out. The surviving Marines rushed to their lieutenant's side, applying medical aid with practiced hands. Outside, the tide was turning. Human reinforcements were landing across the city. The Keth assault force, cut off from their fleet and facing growing resistance, began to break. Some tried to flee. Some surrendered. Some fought to the death dot in orbit. Admiral Monroe's fleet was crushing what remained of the Keth armada. War leader Kesseth, seeing his defeat was complete, tried to escape in his flagship. The USS Guardian cut him off and disabled his engines. Kesseth was captured alive. He would face justice for the plague he had created and the millions he had murdered as the sun set over the capital city. Elder Morvith sat beside Lieutenant Drake in the makeshift hospital that had been set up in the council chamber. The human soldier was stable now, sleeping peacefully while his wounds healed. Morvith watched him breathe and wondered at the strange fate that had brought these humans to his world. They had asked for nothing. They had expected nothing. They had simply come because they heard a cry for help, and they had given everything to answer it. Morvith reached out and gently took the sleeping soldier's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." Outside, the stars were coming out, and human ships still circled in the sky, watching over the world they had saved. The silence was strange after so much noise. For days, the skies of Ashara Prime had been filled with fire and thunder. Now there was only the soft wind and the distant sound of reconstruction crews clearing the rubble. Elder Morvith walked through the capital city and saw. His world changed forever. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years were now ruins. Streets that had known only peace were scarred with the marks of battle. Everywhere he looked, he saw damage that would take generations to repair. But his people were alive. The plague was being cured. The Keth were gone. And for all of this, he had the humans to thank. The cost of the battle was enormous. Admiral Monroe's staff had given him the numbers, and each one felt like a knife in his heart. 14 human ships destroyed. Over 2,000 sailors dead. On the ground, nearly 300 Marines had given their lives defending a world they had never seen before. 2,000 lives. 2,000 families back on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. 2,000 futures erased so that the Valari could have a future of their own. Morvith did not know how to carry such a debt. He did not know if it could ever be repaid. The memorial service was held in the great plaza at the center of the capital. It was the same plaza where the fiercest fighting had occurred, where Lieutenant Drake and his Marines had held the line against impossible odds. The scars of battle were still visible on the surrounding buildings, but the plaza itself had been cleared and cleaned. Thousands of Valari gathered to pay their respects. They stood in silence as human honor guards carried the flags of the fallen. They watched as soldiers they had never met were remembered with words of love and grief. Captain Daniel Cruz stood at the front of the gathering with Admiral Lisa Monroe and the other surviving officers. His uniform was clean and pressed, but exhaustion showed in his eyes. He had not slept properly since the battle began. Commander Nathan Cole was not there. He had died on the third day of fighting, when his ship was destroyed covering the retreat of 2 damaged cruisers. His crew had survived because of his sacrifice. He had not. Admiral Monroe stepped forward to address the crowd. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could hear the pain beneath the words. "We came here because we heard a cry for help," she said. "We did not know the Valari. We had no treaties with them. We had nothing to gain from fighting for them. But they needed help, and we answered." She paused and looked out at the sea of Valari faces. Many of them were crying. Many were holding the hands of children who had been saved from the plague. Children who were alive because human doctors had worked day and night to find a cure. 2,000 of our people will never go home, Monroe continued. They will never see their families again. They will never grow old. They gave their futures so that your people can have a future. This is not a debt we ask you to repay. This is a gift we give freely, because it is right. She stepped back, and the Valari orchestra began to play. The music was ancient and beautiful, a song of mourning that the Valari had sung for their dead for 10,000 years. But today, they sang it for humans. After the service, Elder Morvith found Lieutenant Drake standing alone at the edge of the plaza. The Marine was leaning on a crutch, his wounds still healing. His face was solemn as he watched the crowd slowly scatter. "Lieutenant," Morvith said, approaching him carefully, "you should be resting." Drake shook his head. "I wanted to see them. The ones I couldn't save." Morvith understood. He had felt the same way many times, losing patience when he was a young doctor, before he entered politics. The weight of failure never truly went away. "You saved my life," Morvith said. "You saved my entire council. You fought through an army to reach us." "I lost 12 good people getting there," Drake replied. 12 people who trusted me to bring them home." Morvith was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and placed his hand on the Marine's shoulder. "I have lived for almost 200 years, he said. "I have seen many things. I have known many species. But I have never met anyone like your people. You fight for strangers. You die for those who can give you nothing in return. You carry the weight of your sacrifices with honor and with grief." He looked into Drake's eyes and spoke with absolute sincerity. "Your people are not just warriors. You are something much rarer. You are protectors. And my people will never forget what you have done for us." Drake met the old Valari's gaze. For a moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten just a little. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "That means a lot." In the days that followed, the Valari High Council voted unanimously to request a permanent alliance with the United Earth Federation. The motion passed without a single objection. Even those who had protested the human presence before the battle now spoke in favor of the alliance. The Galactic Coalition, which had ordered the humans to withdraw just days before, quietly approved the treaty. They had watched humanity fight and die for a world that had rejected their help. They had seen something they did not fully understand but could not deny. A reporter from the Coalition News Service approached Admiral Monroe as she was preparing to depart. Her fleet was gathering in orbit, ready for the long journey home. The wounded were loaded onto medical ships. The dead were carried in sealed containers that would take them back to Earth for burial. "Admiral," the reporter said, "the galaxy is asking questions about what happened here. Many species do not understand why humanity sacrificed so much for the Valari. Can you explain it?" Monroe looked at the reporter with tired eyes. She thought about all the words she could use, all the explanations she could give. She thought about history and politics and strategy, but in the end, she chose the simplest answer. "The Valari expected medical aid," she said. "We brought warships instead. Because sometimes the best medicine is making sure the patient lives long enough to heal." She turned and walked toward her shuttle. Behind her, the reporter stared in silence, trying to understand what he had just heard. On the surface of Ashara Prime, Elder Morvith watched the human fleet rise into the sky. The ships caught the light of the twin suns and glittered like stars ascending to the heavens. Children stood beside their parents and pointed at the departing vessels. These were children who had been dying just weeks ago, now healthy and whole because of human medicine. They waved goodbye to the strangers who had saved them. Morvith raised his own hand in farewell. "Goodbye, my friends," he whispered. "May you find peace. May you find joy. And may the galaxy one day understand what you have shown us today." The ships vanished into the darkness of space. The plaza fell quiet, and the Valari, who had never known war, began the long work of healing. They would build a monument in the plaza. They would write songs about the battle. They would tell stories to their children, and their children's children about the day the humans came. They expected medical aid. They received something far more precious, thought they. Received proof that somewhere in the cold darkness of the universe, there were those who would fight for strangers, die for strangers, and ask nothing in return. They received humanity. The sky above Desha Prime burned orange and red. Great ships hung in the darkness of space, their weapons firing down upon the planet below. Each blast shook the ground and turned. Beautiful crystal towers in the dust and ash. Ambassador Rillin stood in the communication center, her translucent body trembling with each new explosion. She was old for her kind, nearly 300 cycles, and she had never seen war. No, Valari had. Her people were scholars and artists. They built libraries and composed music. They studied the stars and wrote poetry about the light between galaxies. They did not fight. They did not know how. "Ambassador, the shields over the eastern continent have failed," said a young technician named Talik. His crystalline form flickered with fear, the light inside him growing dim. "The Cathari ground forces are landing." Rillin closed her eyes. The Cathari Dominion had come without warning. Their warlord, a creature called Zithan, had demanded complete surrender. When the Valari asked for time to discuss, the bombardment began. "Have we received any response from the Galactic Coalition?" Rillin asked. Talik's fingers moved across the communication panel. "Yes, Ambassador. The peacekeeping fleet has acknowledged our distress signal. They say they are 17 cycles away." 17 cycles. Nearly 3 weeks in human time. Rillin looked at the burning sky through the window. "They would all be dead in hours. Is there no one closer?" She whispered. Talik checked every frequency, every registered ship in the nearby sectors. Nothing. The Cathari had chosen their moment well. The coalition was spread thin across the galaxy, dealing with a dozen small conflicts. No one was coming. Then Talik stopped. His body brightened slightly, a sign of confusion among his people. "Ambassador, I am receiving something strange." "What is it?" "A signal from an unregistered sector." Talik worked to clean up the transmission. "It is coming from the Sol system." Rillin felt something cold move through her. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Sol system. It was quarantined, Forbiddance. The third planet from that yellow sun was a nightmare world that had somehow produced intelligent life. Earth, home of the humans. The Valari had learned about humans in their schools. They came from a planet with crushing gravity, nearly 10 times what the Valari could survive. Their atmosphere was filled with a corrosive gas called oxygen. Their world was covered in salt water that would dissolve Valari flesh. They had evolved alongside terrible predators, and they had killed them all. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars against each other. The humans were monsters. That was what everyone said. When they had first made contact with galactic civilization 200 years ago, the Coalition had taken one look at their history and quarantined them immediately. Too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. And now someone from that Forbiddance world was sending a message. "Play it," R'Lin said. Talek hesitated. "Ambassador, the quarantine protocols. Play it." The static filled the room, and then a voice came through. It was deep and rough, speaking in a language the translation system struggled with. Finally, the words became clear. "We hear you. Hold on. We're coming." R'Lin stared at the communication panel. "That is all?" "Yes, Ambassador. The signal has ended." Above them, another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling, glittering in the emergency lights. R'Lin thought about what she had just heard. The humans were coming. The Deathworlders. The quarantine monsters that the entire galaxy feared. "Perhaps they did not understand our message," Talek said hopefully. "Perhaps they think we are asking for trade negotiations." R'Lin shook her head. "They understood. They said to hold on. That is not what you say to a trading partner. That is what you say to someone who is drowning. But why would they help us? They do not know us. We are nothing to them. I do not know." R'Lin moved toward the window and looked up at the Cathari fleet. 180 warships, bristling with weapons, crewed by warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. I do not know why they would come. I only know that someone answered our call. Talek joined her at the window. "What do we do now?" "We hold on." That is what they asked us to do. In the shelters beneath the city, millions of Valari huddled together. They were afraid. Their children cried, and their elders tried to comfort them with old songs. The ground shook again and again as the bombardment continued. In the communication center, R'Lin began to send new orders. Every shield generator would be pushed to maximum power. Every shelter would be reinforced. They would not surrender. They would not give up. They would hold on. Far across the galaxy, the message from Desha Prime had reached Earth 3 hours ago. In a vast underground facility beneath a mountain range, men and women in uniform moved with purpose. Screens showed tactical data, ship positions, and jump calculations. A tall man with gray at his temples stood at the center of it all. His name was Jack Morrison, and he had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought in the last war on Earth, the one that had finally united humanity. He had buried friends and enemies alike. He had sworn that he would never fight again, but then the message had come. Somewhere out there, people were dying. They had called for help, and no one was coming, except Earth had heard. And Jack Morrison could not ignore it. "How many ships do we have?" he asked. A young woman at a nearby console answered. Her name was Kate Marsh, and she was the best navigator in the fleet. 37, Commander. 3 actual warships. The rest are retrofitted mining vessels and research cruisers. And the enemy? Based on the signal analysis, at least 150 capital ships. Possibly more. Morrison nodded slowly. The odds were terrible. Most of his crews had never seen combat. Their ships were held together with patches and prayers. They had no allies, no support, and no idea what they were flying into. But someone had called for help. "Tell the fleet to prepare for launch," Morrison said. "We jump in 2 hours." Kate Marsh looked at him. "Commander, the quarantine. The quarantine can go to hell. Someone out there is dying, and they asked for help. Where I come from, that means something." He turned and walked toward the door that would lead him to his ship. Behind him, the room burst into activity. Orders were given. Engines began to warm up. Crews ran to their stations. Humanity was going to war. And the galaxy was about to learn that the Deathworlders did not ignore a cry for help. The U's Valor hung in the darkness above Earth, its hull gleaming under the light of the sun. It was not a beautiful ship. It was angular and rough, covered in armor plates and weapon mounts. It looked exactly like what it was, a machine built for war. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge, watching through the main viewport as the rest of the fleet assembled. 37 ships, ranging from the massive bulk of the Valor to the small, fast shapes of converted scout vessels. It was everything humanity had. "All ships report ready for jump," said Lieutenant Kate Marsh from her navigation station. She was young, barely 30, with short dark hair and steady hands. Morrison had chosen her because she never panicked. In the hours ahead, that would matter. Engine status? Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Danny Cole's voice came through the intercom. He was down in the engine room, surrounded by machines that he understood better than any living person. "The slipspace drives are holding steady, Commander. I won't promise they'll survive the jump, but I think we've got a good chance. Define good chance. Maybe 70%. Morrison almost smiled. Danny always told the truth, even when lies would be more comfortable. "Good enough. What about the weapons?" Lieutenant Pete Navarro answered from the weapons station. He was a large man with thick arms and a calm voice. Before joining the fleet, he had been a demolition expert. He understood explosions the way poets understood words. "All systems green, Commander. Hellfire missiles loaded and ready. Point defense is online. We're as ready as we're going to be." Morrison nodded and turned to face the crew. The bridge was small, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Every person there had volunteered for this mission. They knew the risks. They knew they might not come home. "Open a channel to all ships," Morrison said. Kate pressed a button. "Channel open, Commander." Morrison took a breath. He was not good at speeches. He was a soldier, not a politician. But these people deserved to know why they were about to risk their lives. "This is Commander Morrison," he began. "In a few minutes, we're going to do something that humanity has never done before. We're going to leave our solar system and enter galactic space. We're going to break the quarantine that has kept us isolated for 200 years. He paused, looking out at the fleet. "Some of you are probably wondering why. We don't know these Valari. We've never met them. They're not our allies, our friends, or our family. They're strangers on the other side of the galaxy. But they called for help. And no one else is coming." Morrison thought about his own life. The wars he had fought. The friends he had lost. The world he had helped to rebuild. Humanity had spent thousands of years hurting each other. They had come close to destroying themselves more than once. But they had also learned something in all that time. They had learned that the only way to survive was to help each other. "I know what the galaxy thinks of us," Morrison continued. "They think we're monsters, Deathworlders, too dangerous to be trusted. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are dangerous. But I'd rather be dangerous and kind than safe and cowardly." He looked at the stars beyond the viewport. "Someone out there is dying. Someone called for help. And we're going to answer. Not because we have to. Not because we'll gain anything from it. But because that's who we choose to be. All hands, prepare for slipspace jump." Morrison out. He closed the channel and sat down in his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked in silence. Kate checked the navigation calculations one more time. Pete ran final diagnostics on the weapons. Everyone was focused, professional, and ready. Dr. Amy Reyes entered the bridge. She was the ship's xenobiologist, a small woman with glasses and a quiet voice. She had spent her entire career studying alien species from a distance. Now she was about to meet them in person. "Commander, I've prepared briefing materials on the Valari and the Cathari," she said, handing him a tablet. The Valari are a Category 7 species. Extremely fragile, completely non-violent. They communicate through light patterns and harmonic frequencies. They'll probably be terrified of us. And the Cathari? Amy's expression darkened. Category 4. Aggressive, territorial, militaristic. They've conquered 43 worlds in the last century. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have much better technology. Weaknesses? They're arrogant. They've never lost a war. They won't expect anyone to challenge them, especially not a quarantined species from a death world. Amy paused. "But Commander, I have to be honest. Our chances are very low. Their ships are faster, better armed, and better shielded. We're going into a fight we probably can't win." Morrison looked at the tablet in his hands. The Valari looked like living crystals, beautiful and delicate. The Cathari looked like nightmares, all sharp edges and dark scales. "We're not going to win by being stronger," he said finally. "We're going to win by being crazier. They've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. And what are we capable of?" Morrison handed back the tablet. "Anything we have to be." The countdown reached 0. Across the fleet, slipspace drives activated. Reality twisted and bent as 37 ships punched holes in the fabric of space itself. The stars stretched into lines of light dot, and then they were gone. The journey through slipspace was strange and unsettling. The viewports showed nothing but swirling colors that hurt to look at. The crew stayed at their stations, monitoring systems and waiting. Ganny Cole worked constantly in the engine room, keeping the drive stable through sheer willpower and engineering skill. 2 ships experienced minor failures and had to drop out of the formation. They would catch up later. If there was a later dot in her small cabin, Amy Reyes reviewed everything humanity knew about alien psychology. She tried to imagine how the Valari would react when humans appeared in their sky. Would they see rescuers or invaders? Saviors or monsters? She hoped they would give humanity a chance to explain. On the bridge, Morrison sat in silence, thinking about what was coming. He had fought many battles in his life. He had killed enemies and watched friends die. He had never gotten used to it. "Commander," Kate said softly, "we're approaching the exit point. 60 seconds to normal space." Morrison stood. "All hands, battle stations. As soon as we exit slipspace, we're in the combat zone. Weapons free on my command." The crew acknowledged. The tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut. Everyone knew that the next few minutes would determine whether they lived or died. 10 seconds, Kate counted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The swirling colors of slipspace vanished. The stars returned. And directly ahead, the planet Desha Prime hung in space, surrounded by fire and death. The Cathari fleet was everywhere. Morrison counted over 100 warships, their weapons raining destruction on the world below. The planet's shields flickered weakly, barely holding. "Commander," Pete said, his voice tight, "I'm reading 183 enemy vessels. They've seen us." Morrison looked at the burning planet. Somewhere down there, millions of innocent beings were dying. They had called for help, and humanity had answered. "Open a channel," Morrison said. "Let them know we're here." The Deathworlders had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The Cathari fleet was retreating, but the battle was not over. On the surface of Desha Prime, enemy ground forces were still fighting. They had landed before the human fleet arrived, and now they were trapped on a world they could no longer escape. Commander Morrison studied the tactical display on the Valor's bridge. Red dots showed Kethari positions across the eastern continent. Blue dots showed Valari population centers, including the capital city, where millions of civilians were huddled in shelters. "The ground forces are digging in," said Kate Marsh. "They know they can't be extracted. They're going to cause as much damage as possible before they're stopped. Then we stop them now." Morrison turned to the communication officer. "Get me to use Horizon." "Commander, Lisa Vance." A moment later, Lisa's face appeared on screen. She was about Morrison's age, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much war. The Horizon was one of the 3 actual warships in the fleet, built for ground support operations. "What do you need, Jack?" Lisa asked. "Drop pods. I need soldiers on the ground as fast as possible. The Kethari are moving toward civilian centers. We have to get between them and the Valari." Lisa nodded without hesitation. "My Marines are ready. Give me 10 minutes to get into position." "You have 5. Morrison out." The Horizon moved toward the planet, its hull still smoking from battle damage. In the ship's launch bay, 47 men and women in powered armor checked their weapons and sealed their helmets. They were the best soldiers humanity had, volunteers who had trained for years for a mission they never expected to happen. Sergeant Ben Torres was among them. He was 35 years old, broad-shouldered and quiet. He had grown up in a small town, joined the military to see the world, and ended up seeing the stars instead. This would be his first real combat mission. "Sergeant," said Private Maria Santos, a young woman with nervous eyes, "what do we do when we get down there?" "We've never fought aliens before." Then checked his rifle one more time. "Same thing we'd do anywhere else. Find the enemy. Protect the civilians. Don't die. That's simple. Combat is always simple. Staying alive is the hard part." The drop pod sealed. The bay doors opened, and 47 human soldiers fell toward an alien world. The descent was violent and fast. Ben felt the G-forces press against his chest, trying to crush him. Warning lights flashed as the pod's heat shield burned away. Through the tiny viewport, he saw the sky change from black to orange to blue. Then the pod slammed into the ground, and everything went white. When Ben's vision cleared, he kicked open the hatch and emerged into chaos. The Valari capital was burning. Crystal towers had collapsed into rubble. Strange plants with glowing leaves smoldered in craters. The air smelled wrong, too sweet and too clean. "All units report," Ben said into his helmet radio. One by one, his squad checked in. Everyone had survived the drop. They gathered at the rally point, a plaza near the center of the city. In the distance, they could hear weapons fire and screaming. "Movement ahead," said Private Carlos Rivera, checking his scanner. "Kethari patrol. 20 hostiles. They're moving toward a civilian shelter." Ben made a quick decision. "We intercept. Move fast. Stay quiet. Take them down before they know we're here." The squad moved through the ruined streets. The Valari buildings were beautiful, even in destruction, all curves and light and crystal. It was like running through a dream. They found the Kethari patrol near a collapsed bridge. The aliens were big, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark scales and carrying weapons that crackled with energy. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything stronger than themselves. Ben raised his hand. His squad stopped. He counted the enemy, chose his targets, and gave the signal. The humans opened fire. Kethari died before they knew what was happening. Human weapons were loud, crude, and absolutely deadly. Bullets punched through alien armor. Grenades exploded in alien faces. Within 30 seconds, the patrol was dead. Private Santa stared at the bodies. "We did it. We actually did it. Don't celebrate yet." Ben reloaded his weapon. "There are a lot more where they came from. Let's move." They reached the civilian shelter 5 minutes later. It was a dome of reinforced crystal, half buried in the ground. The Valari had built it to withstand earthquakes, not war, but it was still standing. Ben approached the entrance carefully. He did not want to frighten the people inside. "Hello? We're from Earth. We're here to help." Silence. Then, slowly, a section of the dome became transparent. On the other side, hundreds of Valari huddled together. They were beautiful and strange, their bodies made of living crystal that flickered with inner light. They looked terrified. One of them, smaller than the others, moved toward the entrance. A child. Its light was dim and flickering, a sign of extreme fear. Ben removed his helmet. He knew he looked strange to them, maybe even monstrous. Soft skin, small eyes, flat teeth. Nothing like the graceful beings inside. He knelt down so he was at the child's level. "Hey there. It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." The child did not understand his words, but it seemed to understand his tone. It stopped trembling. The light inside it grew a little stronger. Ben reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. It was just compressed nutrients, standard military food, but it was all he had. He held it out to the child. Slowly, very slowly, the child reached out and took the bar. It turned the strange object over in its crystalline hands, examining it. Then it looked up at Ben with something that might have been curiosity. "That's right," Ben said softly. "We're friends. We came to help." Above them, the battle continued. The UES Horizon had taken critical damage while providing cover for the drop pods. Commander Lisa Vance stood on her burning bridge, watching systems fail one after another. "Commander," said her first officer, "we've lost main propulsion. Life support is failing. We need to abandon ship." Lisa looked at the tactical display. A Cathari straggler ship was heading toward the civilian zones, probably trying to cause as much damage as possible before it was destroyed. The Horizon was directly in its path. "Get the crew to the escape pods," she said. "Commander?" "That's an order. I'm going to give that ship something to think about." The bridge crew evacuated. Lisa stayed at the helm, alone. She aimed the Horizon at the approaching enemy vessel and pushed the engines to full power. The ship groaned, shook, and surged forward. The Cathari ship tried to evade, but it was too late. The Horizon slammed into it at full speed, both ships erupting in a ball of fire that lit up the sky. On the ground, Ben Torres saw the explosion. He did not know what had happened, but he knew that someone had just given their life to protect the people he was guarding. He stood and faced his squad. "We hold this position. No matter what comes, we do not let anything happen to these people." "Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant." They spread out around the shelter, weapons ready. In the hours that followed, 3 more Cathari patrols tried to reach the civilians. None of them succeeded. By the time the sun set on Nesha Prime, the last enemy forces had been eliminated. The battle was over. In the shelter, the Valari child still held the ration bar. It had not eaten it. Instead, it clutched it like a treasure, a gift from the strange creatures who had fallen from the sky. Ben sat outside the entrance, exhausted. His armor was dented and scorched. His muscles ached. But when the child came to sit beside him, watching the stars appear in the alien sky, he smiled. "You're safe now," he said. "I promise." The child did not understand the words, but it understood the promise. Some things did not need translation.